Hi there! Welcome to the Aquarium of the Pacific's Aquarium Online Academy. My name is Courtney. I'm a part of the education department here, and I'm joined by my friend Jen. She's going to be helping us out with showing us all these backgrounds here and changing it up. So today we're talking about corals. And as we're talking today, if you want to ask a question or share something that you know, you can totally do that. And the best way to do that is by contacting us through this number at the bottom, 562-286-1838. And if you're watching this afterwards, or maybe just didn't feel like contacting us during the show, that's okay. You can also email us a question at live@lbaop.org. So I really encourage you to reach out because the more involvement we get here, the more fun it is and the more learning we all get to do together. So like I said, we're going to be learning about coral. So I'm actually going to take a step back for a second. This is our coral reef exhibit here at the aquarium. And I'd like to invite you to just take a minute to try and see what you notice, what things pop out about our coral reef. So when we are making observations as scientists, a lot of cool things to look for is what kind of colors or shapes we see. And I invite you to try and think, I noticed this makes me think, what kind of question? And you can try and use what you can see to answer that question and what you already know. And whatever question you have, I hope we answer it today. Awesome. Yeah, so you see we have a lot of different fish in our coral habitat, a lot of different colors, some different shapes and sizes. Before I really get into that, you might be thinking, what is coral? So coral, it lives in tropical habitats where we have a lot of sunlight. You might notice that it's very clear water here. We won't really find its coral around our coast here in California. Ooh, I just had someone say that they noticed a bunch of fish and a scuba diver. That's right. Like I said, this is our exhibit here at the aquarium. So occasionally we have to have a scuba diver go in there to help clean it, as well as helping to feed all of our fish. And like I said earlier, there is a lot of different fish here, a lot of different species. That's one thing that's really cool about coral is it is a home to many different species who are able to all live together. So as I was saying, coral, it lives in tropical habitats. In fact, I'm going to get us a picture of some up-close coral, or maybe Jen has a picture for us. Now, some of you might be kind of confused when I said, oh, it lives somewhere, because maybe you see this and you think it's a plant, or maybe you've seen coral and it looks kind of hard and rocky. Well, coral is actually an animal itself. It's really cool. It's these teeny tiny little squishy things called polyps. That's the actual coral itself, just like we see here. So it is a living animal. It might look like a plant, it might look like a rock. There's a lot of different kinds of coral. They're all very special. But the actual coral itself is these little guys, these squishy little polyps. So what is that stuff we see then that looks like a plant and rock? Well, that is actually their skeleton. So actually, I'm going to take you over to my document cam and we can look at a coral skeleton real quick. So this is an example of a coral skeleton. So I'm going to try and get us a little bit zoomed in so you can see this. All of these tiny holes in the coral skeleton, that is where the actual coral lives. Let me get another one out for you so you can. There we go. Sorry about that. Jen just let me know. My lighting was not on. All right. Let me show you all that again. So, here you can see these little holes, and this is where the coral, each little polyp, lives. So you will have a bunch of polyps living together and creating this skeleton. Let me show you another example. So what we see, these skeletons, this is something that actually build around their body. And it's called calcium carbonate. I'm going to write that down. If that is a really big word for you, don't worry. It is a big word for me too. It is not the end of the world if you do not remember it after this. Let me go ahead and write that down for you anyways, for any of my vocab fans here today. Calcium carbonate. Yeah. So one thing that's really cool about coral, like I said, they build these skeletons, but they are not the only ones living there. They are joined by something called zooxanthellae. Here's another example of some coral. So zooxanthellae is a type of algae, and it lives. Ooh, Jen just has a great picture right here. So we have our little coral polyp that lives inside of those skeletons. So like I was saying, zooxanthellae is an algae that also lives in the coral skeleton. It's a really cool relationship the coral and this algae have. So the algae, they get a home, they get protection by living inside that skeleton. And the coral, they get a really steady supply of oxygen from the algae. So maybe it's the first time you're hearing about algae. Algae is, the way we describe it here at the aquarium, it's not a plant, but it acts a lot like a plant. So the same way plants give us here on land oxygen, algae creates oxygen as well. It takes energy from the sun and uses that to create oxygen. And so because of that, the coral have a really nice steady supply of it. Another thing that happens is that the algae that lives inside the coral, that helps give coral its bright, beautiful colors. You can see, again, same example of how bright and colorful corals are. And that is all because of the algae that live inside their skeletons. So actually, I would like this to take a minute to check this out because we talked a little bit about coral, the algae that lives there, and their relationship. But there's a lot of other really cool relationships in coral reefs as a whole. One thing that's really awesome about coral is it's almost like a city. You have a lot of different kinds of fish that are living together right on top of each other, and every animal that lives there contributes to the health of the coral reef as a whole. So I want you to try and take a minute, see what you notice. Like I said, as scientists, we always want to see what we can observe and think of some questions that we can find answers to. And if you have anything you do want to add, again, please add, please contact us through that phone number or through the email. I'd love to hear from you. So you might notice, as you did with our other coral habitat, how many colors there are. One thing that's really cool about coral reefs is they are so bright and beautiful. Ooh, I had someone contact us and they said, I see fish use coral for hiding. Do they also use it for protection? Yeah. So in this coral reef, you see there's a lot of teeny tiny nooks and crannies that are really hard to get into. And you also see a lot of these fish, they're pretty small. They're not really, really big. Not that there aren't bigger fish in coral reefs, but a lot of the fish that live here are pretty small. And the reason for that is that it helps them get into those small spaces, which is great protection for them. And we talked a little bit about the colors of the fish here. Well, if we have them living in a habitat that's really colorful, what helps them blend in more? Is it going to be being just as colorful or being like dark and gray and drab? We do have some brown colors here, but you see there's a lot of bright colors too. So if you said it'd be better to be a bright, colorful fish here, you are right. So the reason for that is they want to blend in. That helps them stay safe and makes it harder for bigger fish to see them. Oh, got a great fish just swim by right now. Oh, I believe that is a parrotfish. Okay, that's actually one of my favorite animals that live in a coral reef. Hold on to that thought. I'm gonna get back to parrotfish. But anyways, the point I'm getting to is a lot of fish that live in coral reefs have adapted to be small and colorful. So an adaptation is something that an animal's born with that helps it survive. It could be something on their body, or it could be something it does, an instinct that it has that helps it survive better in its environment, in its habitat. So, like I said, a lot of animals that live in coral reefs have adapted to be colorful and small because they need to fit in those small nooks and crannies of a coral reef and blend in with how colorful the reefs are themselves. But let me go back to that parrotfish because we talked a little bit about how animals in coral reefs are all connected to each other and they all contribute something to the coral reef. And parrotfish are really unique, and that is because of what they eat. So I'm going to give you a minute to try and guess what it is. Say, what is around a coral reef that we know of that is really, really plentiful? There's a lot of it there. Yeah. And when it comes out, it actually becomes this really soft, small sand that you see here. So if you've ever been to a white sand beach and you loved how soft and nice it was, you can thank our parrotfish for taking coral and making into that. It's a little bit gross, but it's a really important part of the coral reef habitat as a whole. Uh, Parrotfish, another cool thing about them, some might say it's a little bit gross. I think it's really fun. Oh, that's a beautiful parrotfish with its smile. Beautiful. Um, so as an animal, eventually you have to rest or you have to get rest somehow. The way the parrotfish does that is it'll actually create a bubble of mucus around its whole body, and that protects it from germs, parasites, and it uses that to protect itself while it sleeps. So, parrotfish, some might say it's gross. I think it's a really cute, interesting animal. One of my favorite coral reef fish. Speaking of which, a super fan favorite coral reef fish I'm sure you know about is the clownfish. And the clownfish, a lot like parrotfish and the other animals talked about so far, they are another example of a relationship in coral reefs. So you might see these clownfish swimming around in an anemone. And if you know anything about anemones, you know they have these cells on them that can sting. So if you have joined us here at the aquarium, you might have been able to touch one of our anemones. Maybe there's an aquarium where you live where you can touch anemones too. But you know, it feels kind of sticky for animals that they're trying to eat. It actually is a sting. And it uses that to sting the animals it wants to eat and pull it inside of its body. So you might be wondering, why are the clownfish there if it's so stinging? Well, that is because the clownfish have a really cool adaptation of their own. They have this layer of mucus around them. Ooh, here's some cool video of it. So they have this layer of mucus on their body, and that makes it so that they're not affected by the stings of the sea anemone. So, what do they get from the sea anemone? Why do they live there in the first place? Well, by living in a sea anemone that is dangerous for other animals but doesn't affect them, they get protection and a home. The sea anemones, they also get a little bit something out of this because, like I said, when we're talking about the parrotfish, whenever an animal eats, eventually the waste has to go somewhere, and the sea anemones are actually able to eat that themselves. So both animals are getting something out of this, a lot like the coral and the zooxanthellae, that algae that we were talking about earlier. Oh, and actually, you might notice this sea anemone looks a little bit like that close-up of a coral we were looking at earlier. And that's because sea anemones and corals are actually related. They're in the same family. They are both called cnidarians. Another animal in this group is jellyfish. So even though coral might not seem like it at first sight, we know now that we're coral experts, sea anemones and coral and jellyfish, they're all super similar. I kind of think that a close-up coral polyp just looks like a teeny tiny sea anemone. Awesome. So I'm now, let me see, Jen, can you throw us into coral predators? So we've looked a lot at the smaller fish, the smaller animals that live in a coral reef. And like I said, we have mostly small animals because that helps them live in the teeny tiny cracks in the crevices. So we've talked about the smaller animals that live in a coral reef, but there are some bigger animals. And we're going to talk about one. It's one of my favorites. It's really cool. I think super cute. I'm going to show you ones that we have here. Awesome. Well, that's okay because you can still see the animal I want to talk about. It's this guy right there. Oh, there's a shark. Wonder if we're gonna see it, but I wanted to bring up our zebra sharks. I think they're being a little shy. We can see our black-tip reef sharks too. And black-tip reef sharks are also a really important part of our coral habitat. The sharks that live in coral habitats. Ooh, oh, there it is. All right, I don't want to be biased, but I think zebra sharks are the cutest sharks. All sharks are really cute, but that's my favorite. And we have a zebra shark jaw here that I can show you. Um, so sharks that live in a coral reef habitat, one thing that they contribute is eating fish that are maybe sick. So how does that help? Well, if an animal in a habitat gets sick, it can potentially get other animals sick. But if that animal gets eaten before it can infect other animals, then we have less chance of any kind of disease or infection spreading to other animals within that species. I also want to point out, so I talked earlier about how fish that live in coral reef habitats are really bright and colorful. You might notice between our black-tip reef shark and our zebra shark, they're really not. Oh, that's a real close-up of our zebra shark. Um, you can see it's kind of this brownish color, and our reef shark, our black-tip reef shark, is more of a gray. Ooh, let me both beautiful pictures. But even though it's not a bright color like the rest of the animals, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have its own kind of camouflage. So sharks have this really cool thing called counter shading, and you see it in a lot of other animals too. So it's really darker on the top of its body, and you can see this on the black tip reef shark as well. It's lighter on the bottom of its body. So how does that help? Well, if you are an animal that is swimming above our shark, that darker color is going to blend in with the rest of the water. I really love it on the zebra shark because it also has these spots, which kind of mimic the way sun shines through the water. But let's say you're an animal swimming below the shark. Well, that lighter color is going to blend in with the sun that's above you. Ooh, see this hammer? Ooh, awesome. Yeah, you can really see that light color. And you can see the sun right in that top corner coming down. You can see how, if you're an animal that is swimming the ocean, it'd be really hard to make it out. And I have to keep in mind, too, maybe if you were swimming in the ocean, you would be able to spot it. But a lot of animals that live in the ocean, they don't have eyes that are as developed as ours. So this is really effective. And again, it's another adaptation. This helps them find food more easily. Let's see, we're almost wrapping up. One more animal I wanted to talk about were the sea turtles that live in coral reefs. So sea turtles, specifically here at the aquarium, we have green sea turtles. You can also find, I believe, hawksbill sea turtles in coral reefs. And they both do something kind of similar to the parrotfish. The green sea turtle will eat old seagrass and algae. Hawksbill will eat sponges that are maybe taking up a little bit too much room. Ooh, here's a beautiful green sea turtle. So one issue that green sea turtles are having, and also affects coral too, is that they are actually, all sea turtles are on the endangered species list. And one reason that happens is because our ocean waters are starting to warm up. So sea turtles, the way they find their place where they're going to give birth to their eggs is by using the heat in the ocean to try and find where they were born. So as the waters are heating up, that's going to make it harder for them to get to where they're trying to go. And like I said, corals are also having an issue with our waters heating up. So corals are really delicate animals. They really need a specific set of conditions for them to live. So as our ocean waters warm up, corals start to get really, really stressed out. And when corals get stressed out, one thing they will do is they'll try to get rid of the algae in their body. Um, I almost kind of think of it like when I'm eating something bad, your body sometimes says, hey, we got to get this out now because it just wants to get anything that's not itself outside. So it'll try to get those algae out of its skeleton. But that means it no longer has those algae to give it oxygen, and we no longer have those bright, beautiful colors. So you might have noticed that the corals that we've seen on video, like I said, beautiful, bright colors. But the corals that we looked at on our document cam were they were white. Ooh, yes, perfect. So this white color. And that was because this coral it's no longer alive. You might have noticed by the fact that it's not in water. But when this happens in the water, that's something called coral bleaching. So like I said, as the algae exits the coral skeleton, it loses those colors and becomes like this, where it's really brittle. And the coral inside is no longer getting a supply of oxygen from the algae. So that means that not only is the coral affected, but all the animals that live in the coral reef habitat. I'm going to show you another. We looked at this a little bit earlier. So we talked today about how so many animals had adaptations that were specifically to help them live around bright colored corals. But if the corals stop being those bright colors, that's going to affect the fish. And over time, this coral is going to die out. And as the corals themselves die out, the animals that live in coral reefs that make their home there and get protection from it are no longer going to have a place to live. So we talked a lot about how a coral reef is like a city. So in a city, when the infrastructure, so the roads and the buildings, when that starts to decay, it makes it harder for the humans, us, to live there. And that's similar to how the corals bleaching and decaying, it makes it harder for the animals that live in a coral reef to continue to live there. So as a whole, this really affects our ocean because even though corals, they make about a really small percent of our whole ocean life. On the planet itself, it's a really small amount area where we find coral reefs. But we find a lot of the majority of our biodiversity in the ocean in coral reefs. Another thing that contributes to this is different chemicals that are in the ocean. So you might have heard about coral reef safe sunscreens, and those are sunscreens that don't have oxybenzone. That chemical can also contribute to coral bleaching. So if you're able to, I really suggest getting a reef safe sunscreen. There are some beaches where they have coral reefs where they make it a rule. You can't go there unless you have a reef safe sunscreen. And a lot of communities that live around coral reefs are putting rules in place like that and trying to do things to try to maintain those coral reef habitats. Because coral reefs don't just provide animals something, they also help us. So a lot of these smaller tropical islands that have coral reefs, they help humans. They'll help break the waves of the storm that comes. So if you live here in Long Beach, you know we have our breakwater. It's kind of similar to that. It helps protect the communities that live there by making the wave not so strong when it hits eventually. And there are other things that you can do to help corals. One thing that's going on right now, people are looking into making man-made coral as a way to provide homes for animals in places where there's already been a lot of decay of those reefs. Another thing that we're looking into is trying to grow coral here at the aquarium. You could see some coral that we've grown ourselves. So we're trying to do that to help figure out how to best preserve those coral reef habitats and to see if we can help grow them ourselves. So I hope you really learned a lot about coral today. I really appreciate getting to teach you and if you understand how important they are and feel energized to help protect our coral reefs and to continue learning about them and the other animals that live in those habitats. I want to thank you so much for joining us. We hope you had a great day. Again, if you want to reach out and hit us with a question, you can email us at live@lbaop.org. Have a lovely day. Bye bye.